So I'm looking forward to this polar supercell to be on its way. It's not supposed to be like this in February. Let's see. I think it looks like most folks are here, so we'll get started. Morning, everyone. I'm Ron Thomas from Manufacturing Outreach Center at UW-Stout. Thank you for joining me today. We're going to go over the discovery process and then look at how that fits into a strategic improvement plan. So to break the ice a little bit, have one of my favorite Dilberts. So it's challenging to do a joke live for us engineers, so I let Dilbert do that for me. So this one kind of sums up how I feel about life, especially now. It's very complex. And then if you listen to the news, they cover it up by just adding easy to use to the list. So just a quick note, this is being provided due to funding under the CARES Act. We did have a grant that helped put this process together and also helped support us deliver it. So we want to acknowledge that. And of course, thank the folks that put that in place, because this would not be possible without their support. And all of you as taxpayers, and myself included. So a little bit about me. I'm an engineer by background, and I've been more or less focused on design, development, and technology my whole career. I spent a number of years at a fan manufacturer in Wausau to start my career, and they were an early adopter, I think, of digital manufacturing. You could configure a product up front, hold the sales order, and it would move all the way, in some cases, with dynamic 2D prints that would make parts exactly for the configuration that was ordered to go on some fan that would go with someplace in the world. So it was really quite impressive digital technology that they had put together. And so I've kind of stayed with that. So you can see the Digital Manufacturing Institute. I did some stuff at MIT for digital transformation. And just recently I started taking these smart automation certifications. So continuing to build on that digital manufacturing kind of stuff. So in an attempt to make this a little bit more interactive, trying to use the team functionality. If you can click on that little icon for chat, and then just put a little bit about, a name, an organization, and then what your biggest concern is for 2021. We can all kind of take a look at those and see where everybody's at. And then, of course, click the post button. Charlie Walker and Donette getting the economy back open. that seems to be more sector specific. Certain industries are running or can't even keep up, and certain ones seem like they just can't get going or may never get going again. Saunders, let's see. Availability of workforce and sustained customer base. I just did one of these events at a client yesterday, and that came up as their probably number one issue was workforce. That there's lots of growth to be had if they could keep their lines staffed. Staying agile, retaining and hiring workers. Aware of programs and benefits it provides. Oh, gotta be careful with the mouse location. Okay, so I know that some more will trickle in, and you folks can read those as we go through. And you're welcome to continue using that location to post any questions as I go through. So a little bit about the UW. So I'm one of 8 project managers at the Manufacturing Outreach Center. And one unique thing about us is that we're built on impact. So there's a third-party survey that goes out to all the clients we work with. And the goal of that is capturing how much did the things we work with you on make a difference. So we aren't going to train or drop and run. The goal is for you to have a real impact to your business so that you can report it, so that we can keep our funding. So that means we tend to do things a little bit different. We try to make sure and work with you that these changes get implemented so that they become real. Because unless they're real and really change your business, you can't really report them as impacts. So on average, we have about $45 million a year. Pretty good return to the taxpayer and to our clients. All of us kind of talk about what we do a little bit differently. I kind of think of it, we help you define the problems and then implement the solutions on a project basis. Those usually fit into 4 areas. And the one we're going to focus on today, the discovery process, that fits in with the strategic management. And then out of that, usually these other areas come up. Engineering or growth, continuous improvement, and smart automation. So a little bit of background. Why did we come up with this process? So some issues that we see, you guys already hit on, labor, trends, technology, and disruption. You're free to use the chat if there's some other ones that you see that aren't on this list. But overall, we're trying to help you not be the slowest runner. That if you guys trying to figure out a path forward, we can help you get away from the bear. So moving on, I'm going to touch on these just a little bit. Labor, you guys have all talked about it. The U.S. population, Wisconsin population are increasing, but unfortunately the workforce is not increasing. So it's more or less flat out till 2030. And this graph tells one story, but I think this pie chart makes it even clearer. All of the growth in our population is over 65. I think 94% is pretty much all. So labor is definitely a challenge. But there's a little bit of a bright spot. Technology has made a big difference. The productivity in manufacturing over the last 60 some years is also growing exponentially. It's hit a little bit of a slowdown in that exponential growth recently, but more or less, you can summarize it by saying, the world of our grandparents, what they got done in 8 hours, a worker today can get done in 1 hour. So technology definitely is making a difference. Today, most of that technology is in digitization. And I think all of us, whether we know it or not, interact probably with artificial intelligence on a daily basis. And hopefully that just gets more and more helpful to us without HAL taking over the world. If you're concerned about that, you can check out If Robots Will Take My Job. I know a number of you have looked at cobots, so those are starting to make a difference as the technology price and costs come down and get more of a distributed user base. It's getting more efficient and effective. And anybody who talks to their phone or does voice-driven searches is familiar with natural language processing and how far that come. I actually just heard from an investing resource that I listen to, Kathy Wood, who runs the ARC family of funds. And she was saying that each year the models get 100 times larger and that they're 37% less costly. So they're growing in size exponentially and they're still going down in cost. So it just makes you wonder how long until the cloud knows everything. But moving on. So technologies. Last disruption. So if nobody's noticed, the pandemic is definitely threw a kind of a monkey in the works. We seem to be kind of getting on the outside of that now. The GDP is about 2/3 of the way recovered. So that's a really good thing. And it seems like that's continuing to improve. As a country, this is a pretty new graph. The employment is doing well in manufacturing in the US. It didn't see as much of an impact. But Wisconsin manufacturing took a bigger hit, and there appears that there is some available workforce, at least within our region. So there's some hope. So if you can, go out there and grab people while you can. So close that all out. The last thing on disruption is this quote. That's another financial. Who's the fast fish? So it used to be that the big fish keep eating up the little fish, but now it's the fast fish that eats the slow fish. So who is the fast fish? Hopefully that's the company that can respond the fastest. I mean, just look at what the Googles, the Ubers, the Teslas have done. And if some of you haven't noticed, there's a little bit with GameStop that the fast fish overtook the Wall Street sharks, at least for the near term here. So that's all about fast and taking advantage of some of these newer technologies to make that happen and using your people. So that's the backdrop, why we came up with this. So what is the discovery process? So to put it in clear black and white, it's a series of events that we facilitate to first just get your team talking again. A lot of us have been cooped up and separated, and maybe for almost a year haven't really gotten together to talk about just what's happening and what you're dealing with. So we help you guys do that, and along with that, we focus the conversation to figure out your opportunities, build them into some priorities, make a plan, get you the resources or connect you to resources to help make it happen. And then assuming you keep going on it, we build it into a repeatable system. So what does the system look like? If you take it as a whole, it helps to align your leadership, your whole company, directs your attention to the critical few, helps you drive improvement company-wide, and hopefully you can repeat the process as often as needed to keep driving the improvement process every year. So the main thing it's built on is a diagnostic that we put together that hits on 6 different areas. It's an all digital tool, back to that trying to become the fast fish idea. It hits on all these different areas, and it helps you lead a conversation that covers the whole company, from sales to support. So what's in it for you? It sounds too good to be true. All those areas are built on best practices. We actually had some previous tools similar to this that were put together. And we kind of took the best of everybody's kind of lines of questionings we could find to build them into a single diagnostic. The goal is we facilitate it, but it's your conversation. And just a few quotes of some of the people that have gone through it was, it was a great team building, balancing perspective, gives a chance for all of you to have part in the conversation, makes you think globally, and probably the one we hear the most often, it brings up topics that you usually just don't get together to discuss as a group. And I'll share a couple of examples of successful companies that followed a process like this. And one was a smaller company, and through this process, and then with follow-up work on lean and continuous improvement, we're able to get around a 50% reduction in their direct labor hour per unit. So in a sense, that's doubling your productivity. So pretty good. Well, it's fantastic. I'm sure most of us would love to double our productivity. And this is another one. It's more about that longer journey. So if you use a process like this and keep building on it, they started way back many years ago with continuous improvement. They had improvement. They could then change the way they did their pricing and customer structure. And then they could look at digitizing and automation. So it's kind of one step building on the other until, over a decade, they've almost tripled their sales per employee. So a good long-term vision. All right. So how does the discovery process work? Assuming you're still interested, the plan is the first step. So after this, if you wanted to do something, we would talk to you and hopefully the leadership, make sure it's something you want to do. The next step is to go through that diagnostic process. We schedule a discussion. Then we usually end up having a follow-up to build the plan. And then, of course, the goal of any plan is that you execute on it. So we help put that together for you. So going through each step, a little more detail. What's all part of the plan? Well, first we try to identify all the people that should be a part of the conversation. Make sure we get kind of all the contract stuff in place. And overall, we want to have a good cross-section of your company. So that means, depending on the size of the company, that around 3 people is probably the minimum that makes sense, up to a max of 12. You get more than 12 and it's pretty hard to manage a team conversation, but we have done it with up to 18 people. I would say that doing a virtual event with 18 to have a conversation is challenging, so we'd probably need to find a place face-to-face to manage that. But in the end, the goal is to kind of have a balanced representation of your company. Next, the diagnostic is a digital tool. So we email it to you and there's a link. It's 70 questions on best practices. It takes about 10 minutes. So we've tried to make it quite compact and fast to answer. And it hits on those 6 areas that we talked about. And here's an image of what you'd get as an output. So you all answer this, and then the report that we're able to generate from it kind of leads you through the results. So instead of just repeating whatever question 4 was, we tell you what you're looking at. So this was your, whoever this company was, example company. These were their ratings for human capital. It gets sorted by the strongly disagrees. What do you need to do to take action? Do you need to take action on any of these? If so, which ones? What stands out? And of course, usually the ones that either had a lot of strongly disagrees stand out, but the other ones that can stand out are where there's a broad disagreement within the group, where some people really don't think we do, and then other people think we're great at it. And that's a place for the team to kind of have a conversation about why does each group see things differently, or what makes them see things differently. That leads into the discussion where we talk about those items in the report as a group. We usually bring a copy or send a copy to you so you can print it. We kind of go through all of it. It's not a global, there's not a quantitative, this is what you need to score to be right. It's just to help guide the conversation. So instead of talking about all 70 things, we focus on the critical few, the top 10, the top 3 in each area, to figure out what are the top 10 that we want to build a plan around. So that becomes content that basically we build into a list and then build into a plan. So we call that the strategic improvement plan. And to show an example, this is an example. More or less, we sit down and everybody has their top 10. We have each person go through what those were, and then we start adding what numbers, how many people voted for more or less the same thing, and you start to see a pattern, and themes usually emerge. Then we take some time to figure out, well, what might you do to solve these? And then eventually you build stuff into a plan. And here's an example. So it's a project management type tool where we lay out what's the project, what are some of the actions that go into it, who's the person that's going to say we're going to make sure this happens, and who manages it. And then a rough idea of a timeline of when activities are going to start. And if we have time, we'll start to talk about the obstacles. What might get in the way of implementing these? So now that you've got a plan, you may need resources to help implement that plan. Maybe identify workforce, or building a continuous improvement culture, or worker engagement. Maybe you need help with safety or automation. Who are the folks that can help you? Of course, as the MOC or WMEP, we have resources that can help with some of these projects. Some of them we can't, and we will do the best that we can to get you other third parties if you need them. And then hopefully we can follow up with you on a 90 or 180-day basis and just see how things are going, and hope that you're having success at implementing the plan, and that things keep getting better, and then that you want to repeat the process. So turning it, instead of a one-off, that it's something that you're able to keep repeating, and after you get one thing done, you pull something off the list and keep going. So that's the whole thing. Anybody have any questions? Ready to rock? If you would like to ask a question, you're welcome to either use the raise your hand, or you can unmute and let her go. Oh, Heidi, did you want to say something?
No, that was an accidental click. Thank you, though.
Yeah, so
Well,
free to type.
and if
Go
there
ahead.
aren't any questions, we'll do a follow-up as well that has some direct contact for everybody, just so they're aware. But it looks like you do have one.
Thank you, Carol. Carol asked, what are some of the typical challenges you see from the assessment on the client? So far, the clients, the number one thing that has come up is workforce. Just like a number of the people have brought up, hiring workers and then retaining workers. And I think the other thing that's come up is the only workers they've been able to hire have almost zero skills. And then the effort of training some of them means that the people you do have that can get stuff done are busy training, or they don't train. And then that leads to more turnover because the new hires basically just get forgotten. I think one of the, let's see what other, that was probably the one that's come up the most often. Supply chain, I think, is the one that's come up next. That a number of the companies, they're starting to run into shortages for steel and locating steel and other supplies, that there was potentially, like, there was some slack in the system and demand really dropped, but now that companies are consuming that back up, you go back to the distributors and all that, you know, everybody's supply chain is starting to run empty. And that's definitely a big concern. And I think, so I saw that, I've heard that in metals, in sheet metal and plate, and also I think in polymer resins, that finding resins for molding. And then with doing the actual assessments, so one, finding a place or a time with a lot of the companies either so busy, finding a time to get together is challenging. And then the COVID related restrictions make things challenging. But the virtual delivery has actually worked quite well for this. I think that's been beneficial. Any other questions? Thank you, Carol. Okay, so just to kind of assuming you would think this is something you'd like to do, of course, the next steps, reach out to myself, or there's a couple other project managers from the MOC on the call, Kevin and Todd, depending on if you know any of us or not, or Heidi. Any one of us you can reach out to, and we'll get you in contact with the right folks. But the first step, we have to have something in place to track the contract. We figure out who the folks are that are to take the diagnostic. So we get those and set up a date and time to send it all out. We recommend setting a date and a time and fixing how long people have to take it. The shorter, the better. I'd say 48 hours is probably the best. If you start letting it go too long, it just starts slipping. And after a certain amount of time, it seems unlikely that certain folks will complete it. On average, we've had very good completion. Most groups are 100% within 48 hours. We set a date for that discussion, and the benefit of the digital capability, the second you guys complete the diagnostic, I can generate the report. So there's even the option that if we wanted to, we could get together and almost do it live, you know, where you need 15 minutes to complete the diagnostic, and 15 minutes later, we could be having a conversation about it. Then we set a date and time to build a plan, and overall the goal of the plan is to implement it, to get the impacts, to make a difference in your business. So thank you. And I would gladly close with my absolute favorite, Dilbert. And encourage you to reach out if there's any way we can help, or if you'd like to move forward with the discovery process. Thank you.
Thanks, Ron.
Oh no, he's got support on his Dilberts. Thanks, Carol.
Yeah, Carol, very wise project manager, very wise. Appreciate that. I can hang on if there's any questions or people want to talk. We can stop the recording and.
Oh.